started. So, good morning again to everyone joining us this morning. Welcome to the December 2014 edition of the Volunteer Match Solutions Best Practice Network webinar series, More Than Writing a Check, Creating Successful, Multifaceted Corporate Nonprofit Partnerships. My name is Lauren Wagner, and I'm the Senior Manager of Engagement at Volunteer Match, and I'm going to be helping to facilitate things this morning. So before we get started, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items. So we're going to hold some time at the end of this morning's presentation to pose your questions to the presenter. There are a few different ways that you can send your questions in. The first is by typing them into the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen, the same way that we just tested the audio. The second is to tweet them on Twitter to @VM_solutions using the hashtag VMBPN. So keep those questions coming in the whole way throughout this morning's presentation. We'll keep a list, and then at the end, we'll go ahead and ask those to Susan. Also, just so everybody on the call knows, that a copy of the slides are going to be circulated after the event this morning, as well as a link to the recording, so you will get all of this information as follow-up. So this morning, we're really excited to have one of the truly great voices in the CSR space and one of my favorite CSR celebrities, Susan McPherson, joining us. So Susan is a serial connector, passionate cause marketer, angel investor, and corporate responsibility expert. And I'm sure that many of you on the call recognize her name from her 25-plus years of experience in the marketing, public relations, and sustainability communication space. And if you're active on Twitter, you probably also recognize her from the bi-weekly CSR chats that she founded and hosts on Twitter. So Susan is the founder and CEO of McPherson Strategies, which is a communications consultancy focusing on the intersection between brands and social good. They provide storytelling, partnership creation, and visibility to corporations, NGOs, and social enterprises. In addition to her work at McPherson Strategies, Susan is a regular contributor to the Harvard Business Review, Triple Pundit, The Muse, and Forbes, and is a featured speaker at many industry events, including Net Impact, the Center for Corporate Citizenship's Annual Summit, DLD, Sustainable Brands, and the Committee to Encourage Corporate Philanthropy's Annual Summit. Recently, Susan was selected as a Vital Voices Global Corporate Ambassador and was named as one of 40 women to watch over 40, Fortune's 55 most influential women on Twitter, and Fast Company's 25 smartest women of Twitter. So you can all see why I call her one of my favorite CSR celebrities, because she really is. This morning, Susan's going to be sharing her expertise with us and will explain how to create lasting impact through partnerships with nonprofits while avoiding some common mishaps. She's also going to be sharing examples of companies that have done it right and some of those that have fallen short. You'll also learn why employee volunteering is a key part of a sustainable CSR program and how you can get your employees on board and participating. Finally, Susan will underline the importance of social media and transparency in corporate philanthropy and share examples of how companies have used social media to elevate the impact of their programs. So by the end of this morning's call, we hope that you'll walk away with some actionable tips that you can put into place in your own programs. And this is a great time of year to really be talking about corporate nonprofit partnerships as we're kind of ending one year and looking towards 2015 and thinking about any new partnerships that you might want to create or changes to existing partnerships to make them even more impactful. So with that said, I would like to welcome Susan to the call and have her kick us off. Good morning, Susan.
And there we go.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
It's always, like, you know, every one of these platforms is different, so it's just figuring out which are the right buttons to press. So,
all right,
Lauren,
we got you now.
Thank you so much for those lovely words. And I have to say, if when I hear that, when I hear my bio, I think, oh my God, how old I must be. Anyhow, but it's wonderful to be here, and hats off to Volunteer Match for all the good work that you all do. And I'm thrilled to engage with the audience, and I hope there'll be lots of questions and comments. So by all means, don't wait till the end of the presentation if you are listening to add your questions so that we can get to them at the end. As Lauren so eloquently stated, my name is Susan McPherson, and I'm Susan McP1 on Twitter. And I'm going to be talking today about how it's all about more than writing a check. You know, 20 so years ago when I was starting to dabble in this field, there was kind of the common belief, common thought that it was checkbook philanthropy, meaning companies would support NGOs based on a particular CEO who most likely at the time and even to some extent today was a male, probably in his mid-50s, who would decide on a cause that he was particularly passionate about, and then that is what the company would actually support. Well, those days are far, far over. You know, there are still sprinklings of checkbook philanthropy, but we know, and certainly in the work that Volunteer Match conducts, it is a much more complex and intricate ecosystem where employees are involved, nonprofits are involved, consumers are involved, you know, partners of the company are involved. So essentially it takes a village. So if we want to go to the first slide, and again now I'm patting my head and rubbing my tummy at the same time, so I'm just changing my view on my screen so I can do this properly and not get behind. Give me one moment. Open. Okay, so the first slide, you'll see what I was just mentioning, so 1994. 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, the landscape looked incredibly different from today. It was a question of if a company was going to support social issues and make a donation, and at that time, only the most forward-thinking did. And it used to be that writing a check was really all that a company would do. But now it's no longer if a company gives. It's about how. And it's about what is behind that check. What else are they doing? How does it align with their larger brand? Companies that get corporate philanthropy right tend to have crafted a clear strategy, align themselves with a particular nonprofit or several nonprofits, and are committed to doing more than a one-off campaign or donation. For example, taking, you know, not doing just a one-year program, stretching it out over 1 to 2 years so that you can actually see the impact of the particular effort, of the conglomeration of the campaigns. So next slide. So rather than one-off donations, as you at your own company start to think about your corporate philanthropy or start to rehash what you have been doing in terms of partnerships with nonprofits, it's really important to think which partners are poised to help your company achieve its social good and business goals, and how can you best support their work. Specifically during this presentation, we're going to talk about how to form those partnerships and how you can be strategic from the get-go. Okay, next slide. Define your values. We all hear that we have to align our strategy with our overall missions and values. So no, it can't just be random. You don't want to just pick any cause out there. The causes you want to choose or select are the ones that have to feel real, authentic, and embedded in the aspect of your brand. In other words, as we all and many of you know, just because it's October, it doesn't mean that your company should throw its weight behind breast cancer causes. Breast cancer causes are tremendous platforms and doing incredibly socially good, important work. However, if it's not related and if people in your company aren't particularly passionate about that issue, you'll want to find something else. You're going to want to find something that's authentic to your brand. And I'm about to sneeze. So excuse me for that. And if anybody said bless you, thank you. You can just tweet bless you. How's that? Maybe that'll help my day out. If you're Patagonia, you're not, realistically, you're most likely not going to pick something that's completely outside the realms of outdoor recreation and the environment. Although, don't always pick what seems the safest. What you want to do is think about what aligns with your company's mission, what will get your employees extraordinarily passionate, and where you bring power, where you can really make a difference. So those are the kinds of things to be mindful of. Here's an example of what can happen if you choose donations and partnerships that are, quote, on trend, rather than truly aligned with what you care about as a business. Back in October, Alhambra Water, and I'm going to sneeze again, this is terribly embarrassing. I'm sorry. I don't have a cold, so maybe I'm getting allergies. Back in October, Alhambra Water sold pink ribbon labeled plastic polycarbonate water bottles that contained BPA, which is an endocrine disrupting chemical that has been linked to various hormonal cancers, including breast cancer. If the company had truly dedicated themselves to breast cancer research, they would have done their own research. So an example of just not good planning up front. And I can't imagine that that turned out to be a successful campaign. Okay, next slide. So I talked a bit about finding the match up front. What is so vital up front? And that is what I just mentioned about doing the important research. Once you have a sense of who you are and what your company is authentically dedicated to, and if I can back up, if you're in cause marketing at a company, if you're in CSR at a company, if you're in HR, if you're in the executive suite, ask your employees, okay? Survey monkey your employees, do whatever form of polling you can do, but get them involved in the beginning. That will also help you be that much more authentic, and you'll be building something from the ground up. Once you do that, you can begin to look for partners that can help you accomplish your social and business goals. If you're a company that cares about rainforests, for example, which partners are best suited to make an impact on conservation efforts? How will that organization help elevate your overall commitment and give you the chance to engage all of your stakeholders with the cause? And just as I mentioned asking your employees, what about asking your customers or your prospects to get them involved as well? Think how much more impact you'll have if you bring these people along at the beginning. And don't just look for organizations that align with the causes that you care about. Look for those that are a cultural fit. Look for ones that you think you will communicate with. And again, that word is so important. What are you and your employees or colleagues passionate about? Because if you're passionate about something, you're gonna see it to fruition. The ones that see eye to eye on how to approach a given social issue. The ones that will challenge you and help you think outside of the box. And I want to just point out one example. I thought just an interesting cause marketing campaign that Facebook did in conjunction with with IMC, International Medical Corps, the International Federation of Red Cross, Save the Children, UNICEF, and Net Hope. This summer when the Ebola crisis just, blew up, Mark Zuckerberg gave a tremendous donation to CDC Foundation of $25 million. And, clearly he has not, Facebook traditionally hasn't been a philanthropic company, but instead, used the Facebook platform. But I think it sent a large message to Facebook users around the world that if he was going to be making this donation, he also was getting his company behind it. And on the Facebook, to everyone who would log on to Facebook, we were all given the opportunity to come along. Now, there's not a lot with Ebola that you could do from a volunteer or employee engagement perspective, but this was an example of Facebook throwing its hat into the cause marketing ring and then asking its constituents, its customers, all of us, even though we're not paying Facebook anything, we are enabling Facebook to make money off the advertising to us. So long and short of it, it was taking advantage of a very timely issue. It was using the right platform to showcase it, and it was both the senior executives of the company writing a check, but then also inviting people to get involved. So I just wanted to kind of showcase that in a moment before we go to much more specific details and examples. So next slide. Back to the planning. create a plan. Okay, it sounds very obvious, but over the last several years, I can tell you how many times I would be at that early outset when a corporation and some nonprofits would be getting together to discuss what they hope to do. And planning was clearly not something that everybody put on the top of the page. You must plan. You must do so up front so that you can ensure that you and the nonprofits are on the same page and have a clear roadmap from which to follow, a blueprint for success. As part of this, you want to be sure you define success metrics up front so that you know what goals you're working to achieve. Think about what kind of partnership you're looking for and the different ways you'll be willing to join forces with the nonprofit to create impact. Working closely with the nonprofit partner to create a clear timeline and plan for the relationship that includes opportunities for engagement throughout the year. As you do, remember that this is designed to be mutually beneficial. It's a partnership. I don't know how many people on today's webinar are on the nonprofit side of things, but I will say oftentimes when NGOs come to the table, they often feel like they are the inferior partner. I would say that is absolutely not the case, but it is so vital in the beginning to define clear roles and responsibilities because both the corporation and the NGO coming together bring vital resources. It is not just about the company providing money. It's not just about the company providing amplification and resources. It is as much about the nonprofit coming and bringing credibility and bringing the fabulous work that they conduct to make an impact. So I think it's really important is each setting up who's going to do what and then hold each other accountable. An amazing project that I have been blessed to work on over the last several years is Girl Rising, the tremendous film that was funded mainly through Intel, Google, Nike Foundation, and Vulcan Ventures. For anyone who's not seen the film, I highly recommend it. It's available on Amazon and Netflix, and it was shown on CNN, and there were ways to see it at movie theaters around the country, and now it is going to India, Nigeria, and the Congo, where it's going to hopefully have even a bigger impact because we know girls by far are less likely to be educated in those countries. But when Intel partnered with the documentary film and social movement for basically getting girls in schools around the world, Intel decided to bring an outside firm in to actually structure the partnership. Intel realized that they were putting $10 million into this investment. They knew that even a little bit more money spent at the beginning was going to help them ensure success at the end. And this firm helped them define the goals on both sides and create a 2-year plan with quarterly deliverables. And lo and behold, the success metrics have been stupendous in terms of reach, in terms of actual government change in certain places, and keeping both accountable. So again, I encourage you to see that film. If you have not, it's a really unique example of the private sector pulling together to help a major social cause. Okay, next slide. Money. We all know that when these partnerships are formed, the initial thought is, oh, that company is a Fortune 50. They have lots of money to give. Well, we always have to remember companies have a fiduciary responsibility to make money for their investors, and that is their primary reason for being. Where they do get into philanthropic work, where they do get into cause marketing, it will inevitably help their sales. I fervently believe that, and studies continuously tell us that they do. But companies also have to be smart about how they are going to go ahead and fund these efforts, because oftentimes the return may not be as quickly as their shareholders want. But this is where companies can get really creative. They can do a lot more than give money. I'm not saying don't give money, especially for those of you on the call that are nonprofits. What I am saying is they can bring many other things that make it an even more worthwhile partnership. So when you think about the partnerships you're creating, think about what else you can give. What assets do you have? How can you support the nonprofit in other ways? How can you activate your employees, your customers, your partners, the people who live in the surrounding communities? I once had the lovely president of the JP Morgan Chase Foundation say to me, you know, I have an army of financial experts at this company that I work at. Wouldn't it be great sometimes if nonprofits, in addition to coming and asking me for funds, asked to be educated from financial literacy because of this tremendous army of employees I have? And I was like, yeah, but I was like, duh, that's so obvious. But believe it or not, nonprofits were often they were very focused on the financial and didn't realize that, there's a lot of other ways that companies can be helping and supporting them. And I'll raise an interesting example. Dick's Sporting Goods Foundation launched a tremendous program this past year called Sports Matter. The foundation had learned, the president of the company also, together they had learned that there was a huge issue of underfunded sports teams in the U.S. Just like we're stopping in many inner cities in the United States funding of arts in schools, we're also now pulling out funding sporting teams. So Dick's put up $2 million and then launched a crowdfunding campaign for such teams called Sports Matters. Dick's, as mentioned, donated the funds, but also really stepped up its marketing team, producing both commercials and a feature-length documentary called We Could Be Kings to drive engagement, to drive interest. And if you walked into every Dick's store in the country, there was signage, there was information, their employees were involved. So for a good case study of work done right and tremendous planning up front, I would definitely recommend you look at Sports Matter, #SportsMatter from Dick's Sporting Goods. I have to say it's so funny doing webinars because I feel like I'm talking to myself. I just hope like everybody isn't snoozing, or if you are doing multitasking things, I hope you were very good at doing it.
Oh, we're here. We're all listeners.
You're here. Okay, so next slide. So get creative. 4 or 5 years ago, we had Facebook and Twitter was maybe, in its junior years. Well, now there is so many more channels. You see on the screen, you'll see Pinterest, but there are all the crowdfunding platforms. There's CrowdRise, there's Indiegogo, there's Instagram. There is so much, Google+, etc., which for people like yourselves can be overwhelming, but I kind of think of it as just more toys in the sandbox and more opportunities to find out what works best. Gone are the days where when you would do a brochure and you'd spend a huge sum of money up front and the printer, it'd go to the printer, you'd come back with 100,000 copies and then you'd find an error in it, or it would be outdated in a month. Well, we don't live in that age anymore, and the beauty of any kind of campaign that you run is you can almost edit it real time. You can ratchet things back. You can turn up the volume here. You can turn down the volume here. So in other words, where you do all your planning up front, you can build in times for maybe not meeting particular goals and then trying a different tactic or trying a different platform or trying a strategy. Failure is okay, because by failing at one of these platforms, you may find out that there's a different platform that will actually work better to help you achieve your goals. So when you're thinking from the perspective of a company, a for-profit, when you're thinking what you can give beyond money, think how you can get creative with a campaign and use your various social, digital, and storytelling platforms to push the campaign to its next levels. Corporate philanthropy shouldn't be stale. In fact, it gives you an incredible opportunity to be innovative and push the envelope. A perfect example, a few years ago, Elizabeth Arden launched it was one of the first campaigns on Pinterest, and I particularly love it for its simplicity. But they launched a campaign called Pin It to Give It, which encourages Pinterest users to repin content from the company's Pin It to Give It board. For every repin on the board that used the dedicated hashtag, Elizabeth Arden would donate one lipstick to the Look Good, Feel Better, which is a public service program dedicated to improving the self-esteem and quality of women undergoing cancer treatment. it was an unprecedented use of Pinterest for philanthropy. Again, very simple, streamlined, very tied to the cause, a very personal type program. So that's another good example. All right, next slide. Again, there's Girl Rising. And I want to say here that the companies with the best corporate responsibility programs are the ones that give all of their stakeholders a chance to participate. You know, I mentioned earlier that even at the beginning, the earlier you get your stakeholders, and again, stakeholders can mean employees, colleagues, partners, customers, investors, the NGOs you're partnering with, and the neighboring communities, as well as people's families too. I mean, if the cause that you're involved in somehow is involved with children, get your employees' kids to get involved. But this is where you can open the door for open conversation, where your stakeholders can weigh in on what they'd like to see you do better, and you'll notice and you'll see which initiatives they believe in, and you'll learn which ones they are more likely to be involved. You know, back to Girl Rising, this was a perfect example of how Intel made the most of a partnership through employee engagement. For International Day of the Girl back in 2013, activities and employees donated more than 4,000 volunteer hours in a global Give Back Day across 17 global Intel sites, including an event with Intel's CEO and 9 other senior executive members in a volunteer event. Now think about Intel. They have 100,000 employees. 70% of their employees are male. And here they were able to galvanize 4,000 volunteer hours for a cause for girls' education. Sometimes, you may listen to that and think, wow, that's a disconnect. But when we think about the future of literacy and the future of computer education, et cetera, the vast majority of the world, or 50% of the world, are going to be women and girls. So it's important to get them on the road. So Intel realized this was a hugely important cause. Employee communications on the topic reached thousands of employees through multiple circuit articles, blogs. Feedback from employees has been extremely positive. The campaign also provided excellent content for Intel's internal women's organizations, including its network of executive women and Women at Intel Network, to leverage their events and membership engagement. So it was a win-win for all, including the 6 or 7 NGOs that were the partner recipients. And they included the likes of Save the Children, World Vision, Girl Up, and I could go on, but you get the picture. All right, next slide.
Hey, Susan, so not to interrupt, but quick question. This is something that I personally have kind of been thinking about as we've been going through the presentation so far. And, obviously really focusing in on, strategic, aligned partnerships, right, that benefit your brand and your company and where you can really provide, support and impact. But, then we're talking a lot about, wanting to make sure that the employees are also on board and excited and passionate about the causes that we're choosing. So, have you ever experienced a situation where there was a kind of a large disconnect between what the employees in a company were passionate about and wanted the company to focus on and what the company thought they should focus on, and how companies can kind of bridge that gap?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I have not been involved in a case where there was this opposed to be involved. I think every company runs into the issue of how do we deal with the challenge of getting our employees involved when they have so many other things on their plates, and then they have their own personal causes that they might be passionate about. And this is where, by surveying and involving your employees early on and helping them choose the cause, that you have them involved from the beginning.
Right.
Obviously, it's easier to do that in a mid or small size company than it is in a large corporation. But in a large corporation, you can break it up geographically, for instance, or you can break it up via divisions or lines of work. But you can turn it into such a way where you can incentivize your employees to get involved if you involve them in the beginning. I'm a fervent believer, because then they feel they have their stamp of my own vested interest.
Right.
So I hope that helps your audience.
Oh yeah, definitely. All right, thank you. So
sure. No, and if I think of examples before the end of the webinar, I'll be happy to bring them on.
Oh, great. Okay. So you want me to go ahead and move to the next?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So a couple of years ago, I was at involved in the outset of a campaign that lasted for 3 years called We Can Be Heroes. It was when I was working at Fenton Communications, and our client was Warner Brothers. And Warner Brothers, who had been a traditionally checkbook philanthropy company, decided that given that they are true storytellers, and clearly given all of their, the movie and television and DC Comics and all its divisions, they are true storytellers. They wanted to launch a campaign to raise awareness and raise dollars for the famine victims in the Horn of Africa. Back in the mid-'80s, when there was a famine in Ethiopia, and I don't know if people are old enough on the call to remember it all, but I certainly do, there was a comic book series that DC Comics had done called Heroes for Hunger. And they thought they wanted to resurrect that. But in those days, you would see a picture of Superman superimposed next to a starving child. If you saw that today, we know what people would do. We know there'd be a hashtag campaign to stop it, correct? So what we were charged with doing is creating the look and feel and all the components of a campaign that would drive interest and fundraising to this particular region of the planet. As many of you might know, there was something, and there still is to this day, something called Africa fatigue, where people are kind of tired of supporting a particular, in this case, it was kind of like, oh, Somalia again. So it was a very big, challenging project in the sense of how do you get people to care about an issue that is, one, so far away, and then to add insult to injury, the target market for DC Comics, which was the division of Warner Brothers we were working with. DC Comics is Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman. That audience that reads comic books and goes to those movies in large part are males between the ages of 18 and 30. That, when you're doing fundraising, is not the best audience to go to. I think many of us on this webinar will know. Those folks are not going to be the ones writing the checks. So we realized we needed to engage with these individuals where they were, and Warner Brothers needed to activate all their employees to become voices for this cause, to be talking about it, to be sharing it with their families. And we realized that Indiegogo was the best platform from which to engage with that particular demographic, and here's why. They might not, an 18-year-old boy may not write a check to support a cause that is supporting the Horn of Africa. However, on Indiegogo, if he gets a t-shirt signed by one of the famous DC comic writers, he would be more likely to write that check. And so we did a series of 3 Indiegogo campaigns over the course of a year, which raised significant sums. The monies were sent to a combination of International IRC, International Rescue, Save the Children, and Mercy Corps. Part of the work that we had done in the beginning, when there was the planning phase, was to find the best NGOs that could actually reach the Horn of Africa. Because if anybody is involved in global development, it's one of the most difficult countries to get resources into, let alone water, food, etc. But the reason I tell this story is when we were talking about different platforms, in the beginning, we never thought of Indiegogo as one because this was a corporate engagement. However, in conjunction with corporate outreach and the traditional channels and traditional PR, doing this Indiegogo campaign enabled us to reach the target audience in a way they wanted to be reached and engaged with. Next slide. So as we just kind of discuss the different examples of endearing success in the beginning, transparency is absolutely vital. We hear it, it's become kind of a buzzword. It's a little like storytelling. We hear it, it's a little like failure. We keep hearing everybody talk about it. But for any successful partnership, you need to be transparent with your partner, and you need to be transparent with your employees. The more you plan with them up front, and this goes back to, Lauren, your question, how do we keep them engaged? How do we keep them interested? Keeping them transparent about the actual project. Honesty and transparency are paramount to effective corporate citizenship, and with social media making it even more crucial for companies to be honest with their external stakeholders, corporate nonprofit partnerships will fail when both parties are not upfront with their goals. Next slide. Measure. I would assume anybody working with Volunteer Match, you're big about metrics. I've seen some of the reports that you all do. And we know that engagement begets further engagement. As each employee signs on to volunteer, more and more employees will do. But you want to be tracking that from the get-go. Measurement is key. Ideally, you want to set up the metrics early on, right at the get-go, and monitor that over time. How many events did your employees host? How much money did your customers come together to raise? How much money did your employees raise? How many people watched a certain video? Whatever it is, make sure you've clarified it up front, and that along the way you're taking the time to measure against those goals. And this is where I mentioned earlier, you can ratchet back, make changes, change to a different platform. If things aren't moving in the right direction, you can change course and evolve your approach. If things are working out as planned, then you can continue what you're doing and look for ways to create an even bigger impact. When all is said and done, having the strong metrics up front and being able to explain and show your impact will enable your executive team and your investors to more easily support these types of initiatives in the future. So next slide. And this is where storytelling also comes in. Once you have a clear sense of the impact that your partnership and your employee volunteer program was able to create, it is time to tell the world about it. Be sure to talk publicly about your commitments, goals, and results, and learn from others as they do the same. It gives you the chance to inspire other companies to do more. And I showcase a few examples of here of Verizon's Innovative Learning Schools program, Bank of America and RED, and Dell, who has been extraordinarily visible on Twitter with a lot of the work that they've done. But sharing your incredible stories and strides help overall, and ultimately it elevates the entire industry. When Intel funded Girl Rising, it set a precedent that corporations could be funding creative projects like films to help them tell their stories. By putting together employee engagement around the film, they kind of developed a whole new genre that we're starting to see with some documentary films. So and now they are in the work of telling that story and showcasing the impact. So it's not bragging if it's an authentic part of who you are. But a cautionary note, companies need to show the impact of what they're doing, not try to make news out of the fact that they've launched a program. I get concerned when there's so much hoopla about the program launching. It is better to start talking about it once you have metrics and impact to show. And ways you can be doing that, video, blog content, case studies, Twitter chats. In the 4 years I've been doing CSR chat, I've had extraordinary amounts of guests come on and talk about exceptional programs that they are running. So Lord knows there's not a shortage of platforms from which to tell these stories, but let's make sure we tell the stories of the impact, not necessarily the stories about the fact that the programs are happening. Okay, next slide. If I can move my needle. And I think we are at the question and answers. Yeah, so Lauren, should I mute my phone? How do we do this?
No. Keep yourself unmuted because we're going to be asking you questions. So,
okay, good. Good.
All right, so just to remind everybody on the call, there are 2 ways to submit questions. You can keep them coming in as we're going through this Q&A. The first one is by typing them into the chat box on the right side of your screen, and the second is to submit them via Twitter to @VM_solutions using the hashtag VMVPN. And we have folks on Twitter right now monitoring questions, so get on there and start tweeting them. All right. So to get started, Susan, we had a question come in, kind of almost a follow-up question to the one that I asked you earlier when we were talking about, getting your employees engaged and how you can go about doing that. And you mentioned, surveying your employees up front to get them engaged right from the start, to kind of get them excited and keep the momentum going. So the question that came in was, so if you go ahead and survey your employees up front to ask them what causes they think that the company should get behind, what should a company do if what gets voted as the cause that their employees are most passionate about doesn't align with the company's brand?
Well, it's interesting. A few years ago, I actually moderated a panel at the CECP, the Committee to Encourage Corporate Philanthropy annual conference. And it was about when corporate foundations pick causes that may not seem like they match. And we had on the panel, we had Hilton Hotels that had chosen trafficking. We had Verizon, which had chosen domestic violence. And we had Chevron, which had chosen AIDS. And from the public's viewpoint, when you first listen to all those, it's like Chevron and AIDS. I don't get the connection there. But as you really go and then unpack it and unravel the layers, Chevron's U.S. headquarters is in San Francisco, a population which, 25, 30 years ago was heavily affected by the onset of AIDS. And then if you think about Chevron and where they drill, countries like Angola and Mozambique, those countries have huge AIDS populations. So what may on the surface did not seem like it aligned, it actually did. And if your employees are telling you this is something that they're passionate about, have them explain to you how it may be connected. Because there could be a disconnect on your part. And perhaps unless it is so far-fetched, then I think you really need to have a come to Jesus, and pardon that expression. But it's the type of thing where, they may know something that you don't know because they are on the front lines. If this is, depending on where this is coming from, it could be an opportunity to really learn something new or develop a new marketplace.
That's a really awesome insight. I would have never thought about it from that perspective. Yeah, and so it kind of now that got me thinking. So if you end up with, a cause like you were talking about with Chevron and AIDS, where at first glance it doesn't look like it makes sense, right? But then whenever you were saying unpack it, it really starts to be clear. I mean, how can you make sure that the public understands that in a simple and clear way?
Well, this is where we're blessed that we have so many ways to communicate with the public, and this is where transparency comes. And when a company says, you know what, we polled our employees, we polled our customers, and they asked us. I mean, there is nothing better than true honesty in that case, okay? Now, again, I don't, I think back a few years ago when there was that crazy case of Kentucky Fried Chicken, or KFC as it's known, and Komen doing a partnership around breast cancer. And, I don't know who would have ever suggested that. I mean, quite frankly, if you have breast cancer, I don't advise you to eat fried chicken. But then again, I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV. But, I mean, where it's absolutely ridiculous, of course you're going to have to say, look, employees, let's go back to the vote. Because it's just absolutely not. But I do think nobody knows more about your business than your actual employees.
Right.
And, maybe you don't give them a blank slate. Maybe you give them 10, and within the 10 they choose. In that way you have a bit more control over it. But back to your question about the public, I think you take the public along for the ride with you. You explain to them why this was chosen, right, and you show them how they can get involved.
Right. Cool. No, that's wonderful advice. Okay, so kind of to switch the kind of viewpoint here from the corporate side of things, we had a question come in from one of our nonprofit listeners asking what's the best way for a nonprofit to prepare to be a good partner and show companies what they have to offer?
It's a great question, and the most important thing is right at the beginning, when a nonprofit walks in to talk to an NGO, it is not about what the for-profit can do for the nonprofit. It is what you can do together and what the nonprofit brings the for-profit that the for-profit wouldn't be able to do on its own.
Right. Okay. So kind of like getting your value proposition together ahead of time before you can open up the conversation with them.
Yeah, and be mindful of, do you bring a different perspective? Do you bring a different demographic? You know, for instance, if you're going to talk to a company that is, you know, trying to target millennials, and for instance, your donor base is almost all millennials. I mean, that's probably an exaggeration, but this is where you go in and you bring your differentiations.
Right.
I mean, but the most part is remember, you're on equal footing, and it's not about going and asking the company for a handout. It is together, here is what we can do.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so moving back to kind of the corporate perspective on things. So what advice, actually it could be for both sides of the coin. So what advice would you have for partners who, you know, forged this partnership and it wasn't successful? So, you know, how can they get themselves back on track or reevaluate or, you know, move forward, I guess?
Well, this is where the whole metrics and measurement plays in so importantly, and that you set up certain milestones, and I mean being extraordinarily precise. You know, if it's a 2-year program, there are check-ins every 2 weeks, and that way there won't be a surprise 3 months down the road that XYZ didn't happen, because you will be in constant check. And you give people the responsibility to own parts of the project. It sounds redundant to have, you know, calls once a week or every other week, but in other words, if you're not communicating with one another at all times, inevitably things will go wrong and things will get messed up and you won't meet your targets. But if you catch them early on, you can then go ahead and rejigger, realign, substitute a different platform, substitute a different vehicle, change the employee that's running the particular project. But again, without that planning and roadmap, you won't be able to do that. You won't be able to catch it in time.
Right. So, so let's say that the company or the partners, the partners don't catch it in time, and it gets to the point where, it's time to break up.
Mm-hmm. Well, breaking up is hard to do. We know that, but there's also something about being respectful and carrying on. The wonderful company Kate Spade was in a partnership for several years with Women for Women International, which is an exceptional organization. I think the world of what they do. Women for Women helps women entrepreneurs in post-conflict countries around the world at the base of the pyramid so that they can get on their feet and vibrant and contribute to the economy, and it's creating jobs. And Kate Spade was working with them in various countries where women entrepreneurs could go ahead and make product that Kate Spade would sell in their stores. Well, unfortunately, the products didn't sell because they weren't up to Western standards. In other words, you walk into a Kate Spade store, the products are very high-end, the clothing, the retail. And, it's not that these women were failing, they just didn't have the true training necessary to be able to make products for developed countries. And so after a few years, they ended the project. I don't think it was any kind of negative ending, but what's happened now is Kate Spade has gone into Rwanda and actually full-fledged are doing their own training so that they can train the women to make products that have the approval and acceptance of Kate Spade's customers. So it's a much longer term. It's not as large because they're focusing on one country rather than numerous countries. But what I think is important to showcase about this is they learned a lot while they worked with Women for Women. So inevitably it was successful in that sense. Women for Women was able to get financial and other resources from Kate Spade. And in the end, Kate Spade built an even better program that's going to live on. So I think what they did was they turned what potentially could be a negative, and again, I don't want to say negative because it was, you know, a lot of women benefited from that program. But I think it was a unique way to walk away from a partnership with both feeling like it was still salvaged in a way to lead to success for both.
Right, and I love that example too because, you know, now with the work that they're doing in Rwanda, it's really, you know, going deeper into creating, you know, sustainable infrastructure for the women in that community to, you know, support themselves, which is
absolutely
amazing. And I love stories like that. That's great. So, okay, let's see. Next question that came in from the audience. And the question was really focused kind of in on a specific program within a larger, you know, full CSR program. So the question specifically was, you know, should a company only, you know, when it comes to Dollars for Doers programs, should a company only allow their employees to use their Dollars for Doers rewards if it aligns with that cause that their company is championing as a whole, or should they still allow their employees to kind of donate that money to whomever they choose? And I think that really what this question is getting at is kind of that, you know, do you really try to keep it tight, or do you still allow for employees to engage in their own passions simultaneously?
Well, I mean, I think it's what are your broader goals as a company? Okay, I mean, there's benefits to both. I don't think there's a definitive right or wrong to that. I mean, it really just, what is the broader mission? What are you trying to accomplish? If you allow employees to choose their own, you know, it's going to be a much more individualized program. You may not be able to show as much impact because there'll be so many different, you know, endeavors, but that is not, that may not be a negative. I mean, you know, if you're a company and you just don't have right now the means or the resources from which to manage a program, then ideally, then let your employees do what they want so that they have the feeling that they are engaging. We all know that an engaged employee is a more productive employee. So, and certainly, you know, that volunteer match, that's what you focus on, and that's what you excel at is getting folks involved so that then they are more productive. Right. But if you don't have the means and you know, have other major challenges taking place, then don't go ahead and try to force fit something that you're not going to inevitably be able to manage and really kind of shine a light on.
Right. Makes sense. So one more question before we kind of move into wrapping things up. So, you know, a lot of the examples that we've talked about this morning have been, you know, from larger companies, large national or international campaigns, which are awesome. But what, you know, I guess how does this translate to, you know, somebody who's listening who might be from a smaller, you know, 100-person local company that doesn't necessarily have the money or the national footprint to execute something so grand?
And I'm not sure I understood the question. What is advice for a company that's small? Yeah. Well, I mean, have realistic expectations. I mean, it's funny. I often say, like, there's no better time to build a corporate responsibility culture, a cause marketing culture, than when you are in formation, because it is much easier to turn a rowboat around than a cruise ship. If you're a small and mid-sized company, you have a much, you know, easier way to communicate with 100 or 200 employees than if you're a multinational corporation like a Unilever with hundreds of thousands of employees. Okay, you know, yes, you won't be able to have as huge an impact, but you can have a realistic impact. Right. Pick a local organization, a local food bank, a local school, a local park, and have your employees get involved that way. I mean, it doesn't have to be this gargantuan, gigantic project. And the thing is if you bake that in the beginning when you're growing, it's going to be a lot easier to continue it as you grow on the trajectory of your business.
Right.
So I think if anything, it's time to actually do more than.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I liked your metaphor. You just turn around a rowboat than a cruise ship.
It is.
So Susan, before we sign off this morning, I wanted to ask you, if there's one thing that, if somebody walked away from the webinar right now that you hope that they take with them, what's that big idea that you want them to walk away with?
Plan, 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 and plan. And then I will also just, one of the folks who's absolutely brilliant, and I'm sure you all know him on this call, is Joe Waters, who has a tremendous blog called Selfish Giving, which is all about cause marketing programs. And I encourage you all to read his posting that he did last night, which was his 3 predictions for cause marketing in 2015. And I thought one of them was really interesting, and it may not be particularly great news for nonprofits, but it's that corporations are developing their own causes and their own kind of platforms because it endears them to their customers. And so that might end up meaning that there's less places for nonprofits to fit in. So when I say plan, it means nonprofits need to even be more strategic as to where they fit in the picture. And when I brought up the Kate Spade Women for Women program, because Kate Spade inevitably went and did it on its own, we're going to see more of those. Yeah. So it's just the onerous, for good or for bad, is going to be on the nonprofit to go ahead and really be thinking, what can we be doing? How can we bring something to the table that this particular company can't do without? Right. So I think that is something, and I wish I could take all the credit for that, but that was part of Joe's, and I want to make sure I give him credit for that.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to go read that article because that seems like a really interesting prediction. I actually kind of agree with him. That's interesting. Okay, well, so real quick, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. So just so everybody remembers, there are other ways aside from our webinars to stay up to date and informed from Volunteer Match. You can follow us on our volunteeringiscsr.org blog. Follow us on Twitter at VM_solutions. You can also sign up for a monthly Good Companies newsletter, which you can do from the blog. So we will be back in January with another webinar. We'll be announcing that after the first of the year, so stay tuned for that. Thank you so much, Susan, for joining us.
Fun.
I'm so enamored with you.
Oh, honey.
You're a wonderful speaker.
Thank you.
You're so smart. Thank you so much for joining us. It was wonderful to have you here. And thank you to everybody for joining in and for your thoughtful questions. And we will see you all in 2015.
All right. Happy holidays, and thank you. Bye.
Bye, Susan.